Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. In this video I'm going to be ranking the legendary lords of both Kislev and Cathay because there's 5 in total if you add them up, and there are races in this game that have more than that. I mean, Lizardmen have 7 legendary lords, and that video is going to be a fun one to do at one point. But I'm going to start with Kislev, with Tzarina Katarin, who is generally one of the worst legendary lords in the game. But why is that? Well, some of the issues she has are issues that Kislev has. Kislev has pretty bad provinces to begin with. They do have 3 super cities, Erengrad, Prague, and Kislev, but 3 big cities are not going to make up for having really bad provinces elsewhere. See, most of Kislev's territory is split between oblasts, be it the Southern Oblast, Troll Country, Western Oblast, or the Eastern Oblast. And these only have minor settlements in all of them, which means that they're very limited. Even if you're not playing Kislev, but if you're playing Kislev, it's actually even worse because you don't have a good economy from this. The structure you build gives you 100 income. Sure, you have multiple structures you can build, but you have limited slots, and because of the supporter system, you are going to be building a lot of churches, which is going to create another issue, because the issue is devotion. Devotion is gained chiefly through fighting chaos, be it Norskins, Warriors of Chaos, or Demons. Okay, that sounds good. The problem is, regardless of which Kislev Lord you're picking, you're going to end up fighting a lot more than just Warriors of Chaos, Norskins, and so on. And that especially applies to Katarin, she does have Norscan neighbors, powerful Norscan neighbors that have mammoths and ice trolls and 2 individual armies. So you're dealing with 2 units of ice trolls early on and 2 units of mammoths. Then you've got Azag. Then you have Dryka, who can beat the crap out of you regardless of what you build because she has a substantially better army than you. Further to the west we have Festus, to the north we have Azazel, Frat, and then Trog. Azazel, Frat, and Trog are powerhouse legendary lords. Dryka has one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, early game army in the entire game, and the Greenskins are incredibly powerful as well. And those are your neighbors to begin with. Your economy is going to be limited because the base economic building only gives you 100. You're going to use up the slots largely for churches. A lot of issues all around for Kislev. They are a faction designed for the base game, which had a far more limited campaign. For Immortal Empires, they just don't scale all that well. And poor Katarin. Now, beyond that, the issue with devotion is you really need those supporters, so you need to keep invocations up. You also need devotion to build churches. You also need devotion to improve those invocations. Like, for instance, the Saliak Dash, for instance, over here in the research tree. Tor, and Ursun himself. So those are some problems. And on top of that, the early game roster is probably one of the weakest early game rosters in the entire game. Because you can only train Kossars from a tier 1 settlement or from a settlement building in general. And from a tier 1 barracks, you only get Kossars with spears. At tier 1, your only other alternative are Kossovite dervishes, which are so freaking terrible, they should just be thrown in the trash bin and forgotten about. And the Kossars with spears are your regular Kossars, just better at dealing with large units, so cavalry in particular, or big single entities like giants and the like. So not really a good roster. Kislev can have a pretty good roster in the mid-game with armored Kossars, though you're then going to run into the economic issues. And armored Kossars aren't really that great either. The problem Kislev has is that they do rely on hybrid units, be it the Kossars, the Ice Guards, the Streltsy, though the Streltsy are in a pretty decent spot, I'd argue. Where Kislev can shine, and where some of their best units are the Tsar Guard, who are dedicated units, or in the Warbear Riders or the Elemental Bears, but those are higher tier units. War Sluts can do a pretty good job. It's interesting, the hybrid units that Kislev has are pretty crap. The dedicated units, they're pretty strong. Hybrid units just don't work very well in a game like this, and I think Kossars worked okay in the base game, but now in Immortal Empires, especially with the range nerf, the melee buff, they just fall behind. To understand how bad these guys are, they're worse, yes, worse than goblin archers, which greenskins can recruit from any settlement. And why are they worse? Well, they're more expensive, they're not much better in combat ability, and the greenskins get significant research benefits for goblin units, for all their goblin units, very early on. So, although on a baseline level, the casters might be better, those goblin archers are going to become far better than they are. And greenskins bring a lot more of them. I mean, look at this army. Look at the nonsense that you see here. This is a starting army. The amount of upkeep I'm spending on this starting army is ridiculous to begin with. And it's not even that good of a starting army. It only has 3 armored Kossar units. They're not going to be that great. It has 1 Ice Guard unit. Okay, that's pretty decent. 1 unit of Kossars, throw them in the trash. 1 unit of Wing Lancers, which are 200 upkeep, throw them in the trash. And a Snow Leopard, throw it in the trash unless you get specific upgrades to use on them. Pretty fast though, pretty useful in some of those early game battles, but again, throw it in the trash. And then we get into Katarin's issues. Beyond the horrible provincial system of Kislev, and I really think what Kislev needs, and I might do a whole video on this, but what they would really need is for these oblasts to be incorporated into larger provinces. That would make them far better, like the Southern Oblast into Kislev, the Eastern Oblast into Prague, all that kind of stuff. That would give them a significant amount of power and make these some of the best provinces in the game. And that's something Kislev desperately needs in order to become more valuable, because right now in the campaign, regardless of which legendary lord you pick, they can be a bit of a joke if you're relying on these core territories. If you avoid dealing with them, things can be different, but I'll get into that in just a moment. Then there's Katarin herself. When we look at her items, they're not really that impressive. The upkeep benefit and post-battle loot can be decent, but generally get items that are going to buff her melee combat ability, right? Although Frostfang can give you a casted ability, though it is limited. The issue is, she doesn't have the melee tree. She does have the embodiment of winter, which is pretty okay, but yeah, she doesn't have a melee tree. She does ride a bear, but her melee combat ability is going to be very limited. As for her casting ability, well, you might say she's a caster lord, right? No, she's awful in that respect, because frost magic, if she had tempest magic, this would be a completely different discussion. But ice magic, but frost magic, yeah, it's not that good. Quite frankly, it just isn't that good. It's mainly for buffing and debuffing, as opposed to raw damage that some other casting skulls, the other casting skull, the Tempest one, can bring. I feel Katarin would actually be better having a combination of some of the more powerful spells from both of these skulls. She would be much better, because she's supposed to be the strongest of all the ice mages. She's actually weaker than a generic one when it comes to her magical abilities, because she's frost, not tempest. So she's not good as a caster. She's not good in combat on an individual level. Okay, what about army benefits? She does get the benefit to Ice Guard. Okay, she's gonna buff them, but Ice Guards are just not that great units either. I mean, they're pretty okay, but like, they're pretty okay because of their frostbite attacks, right? And their magical attacks, true, but they're not the ranged steamroll that, you know, things like Sisters of Avalon are. Hell, I would even say the High Elven archers with armor could be better, let alone some of the more powerful ranged options that do exist in this game. That's because they're a hybrid unit, but they're not that great in melee either. You can make an Ice Guard Doomstack work with Katarin, because you can maintain it for very cheap due to that 50% upkeep benefit she gets. But yeah, that's kind of where it's going to end. Beyond that, oh, she gets diplomatic relations and control with Kislev. The control is meaningless, and so is the set bonus, by the way. That gives you more control with Kislev. The only thing she's got good in her entire skill tree that's actually really worth it is the ward save of 8% in the Lord's army. There are legendary lords in this game. They're more about buffing their own army's ability or themselves, and they give a lot more than what Katarin does. She buffs Ice Guards, and she has a ward save. That's it. And she has diplomatic relations. Her faction benefit is 6 controls. You're never going to deal with rebellions, but rebellions were never really too big of an issue for Kislev. They're okay in growth and control. Oh, she gets recruit rank for Frost Maidens. Okay, that can be pretty nice, except Frost Maidens are limited in how many you can recruit, how fast you can recruit them, because you have to recruit all of them through the Ice Court, and there are limited slots there, even if you unlock both of them, so you are limited. But yeah, having them start at the higher rank can be good, and she can train them faster than anyone else, but there are limited slots in how many you'll be able to recruit anyway. Oh, she gets 10 devotion for successful Frost Maiden action. So just before I'm fighting a major battle or I'm taking a settlement, I'm just gonna detach my magic caster from my army to use a hero action on a settlement, not because it's useful in any way, shape, or form for my campaign, but just to get devotion. It is bad. It is pretty terrible when you add it all up. She does get the pretty sweet corruption benefit, anti-corruption benefit, but that's really about it. She's just weak. She has a weak army. She starts with the tier 1 settlement. She doesn't get anything special for a long time. And yes, once you do get like the Boca Palace and some other structures here, yeah, things can be a lot better. If you manage to get there. That's the big if, of course. And so yeah, Katarin, genuinely one of the worst legendary lords in the game right now. What's interesting is that Creative Assembly made her as a recommended option for new players. She had one of the hardest campaigns in Realms of Chaos, but she could make it work. But now, and she did get an Tempest Mage pretty quickly in Realms of Chaos. She could get the Patriarch potentially based on a random event. She had some choices there. She had some options there, and she worked very well for that. She doesn't work very well in an empire the globe-trotting adventure that Immortal Empires is. At number 4, there is Kostaltyn, who starts off in a much better position than Katarin. First off, let's look at the faction effects. Yeah, he loses diplomatic relations with the Ice Court, though you can make that work because you're going to gain a lot for supporters. He gets a 20% ward save for embedded patriarchs, a melee attack benefit for Khazar units, and leadership benefit for Khazar units to make them less miserable. In terms of his own benefits, he gets Frenzy for his entire army. So his Khazars, which are pretty crap in melee, can be pretty decent due to that ability. In terms of his item, he gets melee attack and the Mace of Ursun. Not really all that great. Though post-battle loot is okay, and it's just one item, it's not a set. Skill-wise, when we're looking at his specific skill tree, he's going to get Leadership. Okay, that's pretty decent. The casualty replenishment won't matter that much, though it's certainly going to add to his style. He does have the melee tree available, the entire melee tree. He can buff his melee units even more. He can get 20% more devotion from hero actions. He gets hero recruit rank province-wide for +2 for patriarchs and hero recruitment cost. He gets devotion every turn. He has a melee attack benefit, local recruitment capacity +2, and -25% recruitment cost. He also has a special ability, though this is not really too significant, not necessarily worth it, honestly. When it comes to the construction cost, though, it can absolutely be worth it when it comes to the 10% income from all buildings. Though that 300% income cost for hallowed wood buildings, that is going to hurt you. And he does have the arcane Vassal, the Fireball spell. Not too great. But Kostaltyn is an ultra patriarch because he is the church, the head of the Great Orthodoxy. So most patriarchs have to choose which one of these abilities they get. Kostaltyn gets all of them: melee attack, replenishment, vigor reduction. He is really good from that perspective, because he'll get all the benefits. Otherwise, you'll need 3 different patriarchs to really get those benefits. And that ward save with patriarchs makes them substantially better in a combat situation. And understand that Kostaltyn has just as many problems early on as Katarin does, but he has the tools to deal with them. He starts with 2 Streltsy units, which are pretty decent. They're decent melee combatants. They've got armor piercing. They're not the best units in the mid game, but actually starting with 2 of them can be fairly significant. But there is more. He starts over here in Erengrad which starts at tier 2 and has a port, so you're actually gonna generate a decent amount of income. And he does start with that Uber City. He does start close to Azazel, which is gonna be a hard early game fight, though you can lure Azazel into attacking you and then win against him. But yeah, he does have the same issues with the provincial system that Kislev has to deal with. Like, look at the Western Oblast. It's generating barely 700 income, and then this is at tier 2. At tier 3, yeah, it would probably get to, what, 1,000 or so for the Western Oblast. I gave Troll Country to Katarin. I gave Hell Pit to Katarin just to actually get a defensive alliance with her, and I can even turn that into a military alliance if I want to. The one benefit though with Kostaltyn is Katarin has to spend quite a few turns to just even get into the fight against Frot and Azazel, whereas Kostaltyn starts right next to them and can wipe them out. It is a much easier campaign than Katarin, and this is a huge role reversal compared to the base game where Kostaltyn was screwed because he didn't start with one of the mega cities that Kislev has. You do, and you start in a much better position than Katarin because you have a port city that starts at tier 2. That is substantial. And Patriarch spamming with Kostaltyn can work very, very well because they do have a good amount of combat potential. And he will easily win the supporter race if you're playing him. Hell, the AI will win the supporter race, even potentially even against your best efforts when you are playing Katarin. Playing as Kostaltyn is a significant quality of life change. Yes, he doesn't have the same +6 control that Katarin starts with, but that's why winning the supporter race is so very useful. So very useful because they do give you control. But there's still plenty of problems that Kostaltyn has. The overall weak economy, the bad settlements, etc. But you do start close enough to Karaka Drak, and you can make an alliance with them, and then, you know, conquer territories to expand in. But it is a bit of a rough start. Nowhere near as rough as Katarin, and he does make it work better than she does. You may have to deal with rebellions playing as Kostaltyn, and you will lose some supporters in the initial battles against the Ungol Kindred, but you won't have the same devotion issues, the same swarms of enemies, because Festus might be an issue for you, though Arangrad will be able to keep it up, and the AI doesn't seem to want to attack settlements. Like, look at Katarin's situation here. She's got Azag marching against her, right? She's got Azag marching against her. And she has to deal with this while also trying to keep Kostaltyn alive. If you're playing Kostaltyn, you don't care about Katarin because it is an interesting situation. Katarin will actually do far better when the AI controls her, at least at holding the line, so to speak, than when you are playing her. Like, she's got two armies, two armies here that are gonna march and deal with Azag. Though she is at war with several factions, including Osland, Festus, Wintertooth, and Azag, which are all going to cause some issues for her. But yeah, Kostaltyn is in a better position, and if you want to play either Kostaltyn or Katarin, I would far more easily recommend Kostaltyn. The fight against Azag is going to be pretty scary, but lure him in, declare war on him, turn 1 really, lure him to attack you, and then wipe him out. Even save the Brotherhood of the Bear, which Azazel is supposed to destroy very early on. I was able to save them over here by luring Azazel into attacking me. Harsh start, but it does work. Now, number 3, we have Miao Ying. Moving on to Grand Cathay. Cathay is in a pretty good spot roster-wise between Jade Warriors, Jade Warrior Crossbowmen, Celestial Dragon Guard crossbow, or Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen, Artillery. They're in a pretty good spot. If you can get Harmony, you're in an even better spot if you can manage to get a perfect balance with diplomatic relations, construction costs, growth, income, and control. And then there is Miao Ying. Miao Ying does have some issues, that's why she's number 3. I mean, she has a benefit in terms of control, faction-wide, diplomatic relations with all of Cathay, though you don't really need that. Construction cost minus 40% for the Great Bastion buildings, which is pretty useful considering she is going to be dealing with the Great Bastion, given her star position. Some magical abilities, some melee defense, and ward save when fighting against Chaos armies, range for missile units, reload time, as well as the Eye of the Storm. I'd say Miao Ying is probably better as a caster than she is as a dragon, though she is pretty strong as a dragon, though her brother is going to do a better job with that. I mean, the one thing that does drag her down on the list is actually her position. Cathay in general is a really good area, but here's the issue for Miao Ying. She starts here in Gunpowder Road, which is the barracks, right? She can get the caravan going pretty quickly, right? No problems there, and can gain a significant amount of money through the caravan system, as Cathay does. However, she has to deal with the rebels over here in the Land of Stone and Steel, as well as in Nanli, and then she has to defend the Great Bastion and deal with Village. She has the tools of to deal with that, but she also has Snitch over here to tackle as well. And I do think that she has too much territory to defend, and it's very exposed initially. She might actually have one of the hardest starting positions of all the legendary lords that do start in Cathay. Does she have the tools to deal with them? Yes, she does. But it is going to be a bit of a fight early on. I mean, the rebels here can be a pain to deal with. The rebel lords of Nanyang, they can be something of a pain to deal with. But she will get diplomatic relations up with Cathay. She will be able to confederate with them very quickly, no problems whatsoever. For instance, get the trade agreement here going, or with the Celestial Loyalists, get military access trade, get an economy going, get relations, get confederations, if you so desire. That will work pretty well. Faction-wide benefits and lord benefits-wise, she does get 20% ammunition to all armies, though I would say that's not really too substantial, because ammo is not really too big of an issue when you are playing as Cathay. Unlike Kislev, you have some really good range units. And you do get leadership when fighting against Demons of Chaos. Demons of Chaos, I'm not sure that's so great since there's no demonic faction next to you. But you do have that. And she does get the minus 50% upkeep benefit to missile infantry units. So Cathay has such a good economy that I don't really find that too particularly useful, honestly. And the meta in Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires has certainly switched from focusing purely on ranged armies, as you would in Warhammer 2, to either a balanced army or a melee-focused army, and she hasn't necessarily made the transition. This is actually something that affects Katarin as well, with her Ice Guard and Hussar playstyle, or affects Kislev in general. And so, while I think her range units are pretty good, she's not really going to buff melee units, and right now, given all the minor settlement battles, it might be more useful to have melee buffs than to have range buffs. Don't get me wrong, if you play Miao Ying, you're in for a good time, though having to cover such a wide territory over here in the Great Bastion, deal with Village, deal with all these factions, reducing their territory to rubble because you can't really hold it, reducing their territory to rubble and then expanding southward and westward can be a bit of an annoying campaign, and she will certainly encounter some issues, but she's in a good spot. Cathay is the only race of all the baseline races in Warhammer 3 that actually made the transition well from the Realms of Chaos into Immortal Empires. The only weakness Cathay has is that they don't have great casualty replenishment because they don't have a hero to provide that, which is a bit of an issue when you're thinking about them. Yeah, you can get a structure for it, though it's going to affect your yin and yang balance. Balance can be a bit annoying, I admit, when it comes down to it. I think Cathay could really use a hero with casualty replenishment. That would make them significantly better from my perspective. But outside that, yeah, they're in a good spot, and Miao Ying is in a pretty decent spot herself. Just not incredibly powerful, I feel. At number 2, we have Zhao Ming, the Iron Dragon, who, unlike his sister, has a melee-focused army, as opposed to the range focus of Miao Ying. He gets 20% capacity for caravans, meaning that they can generate substantially more income for him right off the bat than she can. He also gets a hero recruit rank for alchemists, making them more useful. Minus 25% upkeep for ogre mercenary units faction-wide. 15 armor for melee units, pretty good. Really giving his armies overall faction-wide substantial combat power in melee. Magic item drop chance for him, 100%, so you can get filled with items. Cathay doesn't have the quest battles and the quest rewards that other factions have because of the caravan system being able to generate those epic items, really good epic items, but he can get a lot more items for that magic item drop chance, 100%, and a minus 25% upkeep for melee units. In terms of his special skill tree, right? He doesn't get quite the same diplomatic relations with Cathay as his sister does, but he gets a substantial diplomatic relation benefit with Ogre Kingdom. So make an alliance with Greases. Get Ogre mercenary units. Get them for far cheaper as well. Can be really beneficial. More capacity for alchemist, recruit rank, minus 15% construction cost for all buildings. Substantial combat ability for his dragon form because he gets regeneration. Unlike her. Like, she can regenerate in a fight, only if she swaps out from her dragon form and casts a spell. He can do so while in dragon form and has substantially more combat ability, as well as armor piercing benefit to his entire army. He also gets Master of Alchemy, and then a choice as to what he wants to buff in terms of the Master of Alchemy for his units. So I would say he's better in combat, and he's also better on the campaign map because of that diplomatic relations with his neighbors to the west. Go beat up Gorse, make alliances with Greases, get mercenaries from Greases, get a lot of melee units. And of course there's some special skills as well over here, like armor, 10 melee units, weapon strength for melee units, melee attack for melee units, metal magic, lore of metal. Pretty useful to have Miao Ying, Zhao Ming, as opposed to Miao Ying. And with the caravans being able to generate substantially more income right off the bat, like, yeah, I send one for the Dwarven capital, I get 5,000 right off the bat with him. And of course, you can always increase that even further. I'd also say he has a better starting position. Yes, he only starts with a minor settlement over here, and he does have his own rebels to deal with and a race city to tackle over there. But if he does tackle those issues, if he does deal with the dissenter lords of Jinshen, he will find himself in a really good position, dealing with the Warpstone Desert, dealing with Snitch. Like, Miao Ying in my Snitch campaign was a joke to deal with. Zhao Ming was an actual challenge because he sent multiple stacks of troops against me. And he doesn't have to deal with defending the Great Bastion. Miao Ying will deal with that for you, and he has a good expansion path even in the jungle over here, even if it is unpleasant climate. And he can get pretty good relations with the rest of Cathay. Not as strong as his sister, but still pretty strong all the same. So yeah, Zhao Ming is my recommendation of the Cathay and Legendary Lords. Like, if you want to choose one of the two, you will have a much easier and better time playing as him, especially with the melee focused of battles that we currently have in Immortal Empires, and really the balanced rosters of armies as opposed to just a pure range focused. I would say that in the base game he's worse than his sister, though that's partly because if you're not playing Miao Ying in the Realms of Chaos, the Great Bastion collapses, and that does affect you in a significant way, and you have to rush there to defend it. But in Immortal Empires, the Great Bastion is in a really good spot, so he ends up being the better Legendary Lord of the two. He's got better combat ability, a better campaign position, a better campaign plan with his benefit to diplomatic relations with ogres. Yeah, there's a lot to like when you're playing as Zhao Ming. Finally, at number 1 is Borsis Ursus. You might be shocked, you might be surprised by this choice, because haven't I just spent a good portion of this video trash talking Kislev? And well, the trash talk is very well deserved. The race is pretty crap in a lot of ways. But sometimes, even with a bad race, you get a Legendary Lord that's so good that you can't help but put him high on a list like this. And that's certainly the case for Borsis Ursus. His daughter is insignificant compared to the power this guy has. So let's first talk about his faction benefits, and I'll talk about faction position and how his campaign works. So first off, he gets 30 diplomatic relations with Ice Core, so you can easily confederate Katarin if you get good diplomatic relations with her. And he gets benefit to settling in the Chaos Wasteland, like the settlements, climates receive reduced climate penalties and generate devotion. So every settlement in the Chaos Wasteland, instead of -3, it's going to be -1 control. Yes, it still will affect your construction cost, economy, construction time, all that. It's still unpleasant, but you're also going to generate 4 devotion per turn for each of them. Yeah, per turn. And since you generate devotion anyway from fighting chaos, you're going to be swarming in devotion. Like being able to not just keep an invocation up all the time, but being able to switch between them dependent on the battle you have. Like, oh, just about to fight an army? Okay, switch to Tor instantly to get the melee attack benefit, the Wrath of the Bear ability, and to get 2 supporters for fighting that battle. And then when you take the settlement, switch back to Urson, which you generally want to keep up all the time so you get supporters from taking a settlement. Switch back to Urson. That's the first thing to mention. And generally, legendary lords that start in the Chaos Wastes are some of the strongest and best legendary lords in the game. Because the Chaos Wastes are are the best regions, the best areas of the game. They have minor factions that are fairly insignificant to deal with. But that's not all there is to say about Borsis Ursus, just to move back to him. That's just his faction benefit. Then his personal benefit. -50% upkeep for Warbear Riders. Leadership fighting chaos. Melee attack when fighting chaos. Immunity to chaos, undivided corruption, and chaos wastes attrition. So he can actually move around. Though Kislev won't necessarily have the big issue because they're already fairly resilient to attrition, but he is immune to attrition. It gets even better when you look at this. He rides a Warbear, but unlike Katarin or even Kostaltyn, he is deadly in a fight. He has a good skill tree, a pretty good skill tree. He gets more hit points, leadership, bonus versus large, immune to psychology, weapon strength plus 16% for Warbear Riders and Elemental Bear units, benefit to Tzarina, 10% campaign movement range, regeneration for Elemental Bear units. On top of that, he gets a growth benefit and reduces colonization cost to 0. He also gets Grand Builder, so construction cost does get reduced. He gets Con King, so invocation cost reduced by 10%, and plus 30 diplomatic relations with Kislev.
I shall enjoy.
Now you have to understand that Boris gets all these benefits because he is in the Chaos Waste and he does have an economic and construction time issue, and a lot of factions in here, the demonic factions of Warriors of Chaos, might raise settlements to the ground when they take them. Okay, then there are his unique items. The benefits aren't too significant, though reducing the cost by 20% when requesting an army can be useful. He does get the corruption benefit, more melee benefits for himself, armor benefits, though the armor is nowhere near the power of, say, like something an Armor of Destiny. Like, get an Armor of Destiny, you will enjoy that more. And switch to the Armor of Urson when you want to request an army. The weapon is pretty decent, though I'm sure there are some better weapons out there. But yeah, there's some decent stuff in this. However, here's what you need to know about Boris, and this is what makes him much better than any other lord on this list. Okay, he starts with the Patriarch. So does Kostaltyn. Patriarchs are amazing heroes, probably some of the best in the game, because they give you an amazing amount of casualty replenishment and can give you buffs in combat, and they're pretty good in a fight as well. And they ride bears. That's already a good point in their favor. But on top of that, you know how Kostaltyn or Katarin start with Khazar? Boris starts with Tzarina. Yeah, 2 units of Tzarina and 2 units of armor Khazars. Yeah, not that great, but 2 really good melee units that are heavily armored and have shields. Really good. And then he starts with 2 Warbear Riders. Now, Creative Assembly in Warhammer 3 has moved away from giving a lot of really powerful units from the very start, unless you're playing Warriors of Chaos, because you get Hell Cannons if you're playing Archaon from the very start, or you get 1 Hell Cannon. But by and large, most Legendary Lords don't start with top tier units. Boris does start with top tier units. Some of the best, or the best, in Kislev's roster. I mean, the Elemental Bear is pretty good, but I would generally prefer a Warbear Rider stack. And he gets that minus 50% upkeep for Warbear, so it means that, well, it means that one of these units, you're just basically keeping one of these units for the cost of 2 regular Kossars. And because you start in the Chaos Waste, you can generate a ton of money by just sacking settlements. So for instance, over here I gained a significant amount of money from the Gallows Tree because I sacked it, right? And I decided to play this campaign where I did play Boris in the Chaos Waste, which is his starting province. But here's the thing, you don't have to. That's one of the real benefits. If you're playing Katarin or Kostaltyn, you pretty much are tied to your initial province. You can't really flee away and have a really good game plan otherwise. But as Boris, you can say, okay, fuck playing around in the Chaos Waste. I beat the crap out of Archaon. I'm incredibly strong over here. But yeah, there are going to be problems with this game plan, right? It's going to gimp you in some ways. But you don't have to do it. Instead, take this settlement, spend 2 turns global recruiting and local recruitment, get a bunch of Kossars, and with your Warbears and Sargard and Boris, make for the mountains over here, take the Frozen Landing, take this entire province, take Prague as well, and secure yourself a really good start. Remember, Boris is designed to fight in the Chaos Waste with all the unpleasant climate. But you don't have to fight with him in that unpleasant climate. You can go to a much better climate, get a much better economy, lower construction costs, and then go beat the crap out of Archaon. There was this video from the YouTube meme maker, Tariff, where he made Boris to seem like Doom Guy chasing Daniel because of Daniel's past, or Yuri's past relationship with Katarin. And yeah, kind of Boris does feel like Yuri. Like, understand, the only challenge I faced in this entire campaign, the only issue, is when I met Archaon with a full Doom stack of pretty good units, as well as a stack of his vassal. And I beat both of them in that battle. It was the only challenge. Because you start with Warbears, you've got Sargard, you can get pretty quick access to a Frost Maiden. With Tempest, because you do still have the Ice Court. You start with the Patriarch. You're going to have great casualty replenishment. Your initial foe is a joke meant for you to destroy with ease. Unlike poor Katarin, who has a substantial, powerful enemy to deal with at the very start. And you can get a really powerful army pretty quickly. Like, just these Warbears alone. Like, let me just put it in a different perspective. If you're playing Archaon, most of the enemies around you just steamroll, you auto-resolve. With the exception of Boris. You will meet Boris' stack, and you will have a real fight on your hands. Now, you will win that, especially if it's in a settlement battle. But it is a genuine fight. When you're playing as Boris, you're so goddamn powerful that outside of meeting Archaon's Doom stack with reinforcements, you auto-resolve every single battle on the highest difficulty of the game. I'm not joking on this. This is on Legendary, gentlemen. I'm not talking about normal or easy difficulty. There are powerful Legendary Lords that can steamroll the map. Boris is so goddamn powerful with his starting army and his faction benefits, his army benefits, his own personal combat power, his items, then none of the factions next to him can even put a dent in him. Like, I would take Boris any day against Azazel. Azazel, who scares the crap out of me when I meet him as Kostaltyn. Because guess what? Azazel is large. You get the 25 in bonus versus large. And you start with anti-large Warbear units with a great deal of weapon strength and armor piercing. Yeah, Azazel is meat for Boris. And again, you don't have to stay in your initial position. I decided to do this as a test. Generally, when I play a Kislev campaign, it is a road of suffering and misery. As Boris, I steamrolled. It's turn 24, even fighting the Castaways. The reason I have only gotten this far by turn 24 is because there's a whole lot of nothing over here, and I spent a lot of turns just moving into position. But you don't have to do that. You want an even better steamroll? Go for Frozen Landing. Take Krakadrak. Beat the crap out of Trog, Frot, Azazel. All those major threats that Kostaltyn or Katarin have to deal with, they're your lunch. That's how you get started. You do still have the economic issues of Kislev. True. And Kislev is nowhere near as powerful as Grand Cathay. Nor do they get the faction-wide benefits. They can get some temporary benefits for your faction, in a way that Katarin and Kostaltyn can't. See, the reason that is, and I can't show you here, but once either Katarin and Kostaltyn get to 50 supporters, you can throw supporters to one or the other, right? I don't know why it's locked. I assume it's because neither of them has gotten to 50. But once you get to 50, and I'm at 66, they're at 46, 44 respectively, you can throw supporters. If you throw supporters for Kostaltyn, you get the temporary public order or control benefit. But if you throw support for Katarin, you get the growth benefit. So Kislev, which already is pretty decent in the growth department, can get to I guess the same level as Greenskins in all of their provinces. It's temporary, it's not gonna last forever, but is fairly significant. Actually, being able to throw supporters and get growth or public order dependent on what you need can be very, very significant. Or you can just swap between Invocation of Saliak and Ursund just before a battle, because you're going to be swimming in devotion. I'm not even joking with respect to that. You're going to have so much devotion, you're not going to know what to do with it. Because all the factions that are near you that you would fight are Norscan factions or demonic factions to deal with. And if you do decide to go with the Chaos Waste plan, which I would not necessarily recommend, you'll get a lot of devotion per turn from each region, with the exception of the Tower of Torment, which is your initial settlement. So yeah, Boris is in a great spot on the campaign map. He's a really powerful combatant himself. He has a really powerful army. He has a colonization benefit. He has a growth benefit because of being able to throw supporters around. He gets campaign movement range. He gets a building benefit. He can get access to churches much easier and can spam patriarchs in a way that Kostaltyn would be envious. Yes, he doesn't have the ward save that Kostaltyn gets. Fair enough. But he's much better than any of the other legendary lords on this list. And that's why he's number one. It is an interesting perspective because his campaign in Realms of Chaos is kind of miserable. But here it doesn't have to. It is a bit miserable fighting for the Castaways, but again, you do not have to. Go for Frozen Landing, go for the mountains, follow the guide I put together, get Carrick Vlag. It won't be Prague, but you can get Prague. You will lose some supporters declaring war against Kislev faction, but Katarin won't be too pissed off with you for that, because she doesn't necessarily like Prague all that much. Now, think of this. This is Grimgor right here. Most of the time, if you were to face Grimgor, it would be a pretty scary proposition. When you're playing as Boris, you give no shits. I would easily go with my army against Grimgor, and although he outnumbers me 2-1 and he's a pretty scary legendary lord, I would beat the crap out of him. I'm pretty certain about that. And I don't think I can say that for any other legendary lord on this list. Maybe the artillery support with Zhao Ming and ogres as Zhao Ming. I could give him a run for his money. But yeah, it would be a scary fight. Here, I am not scared at all when faced with the prospect of facing Grimgor in a battle. That should give you an idea of how I feel about Boris. Feel free to disagree, but before you disagree, I recommend trying out this campaign. Because it's a campaign where you just click that auto-resolve battle, and 90% of the time you win, and nothing can stop you. And mostly can slow you down, but stopping you, no chance. And it takes something like Archeon or Grimgor to even give you a battle where you actually have to fight them manually. Whereas as Kostaltyn or Katarin, you're fighting like 95% of your early game battles manually. Same with Zhao Ming and Miao Ying, actually. You're fighting a lot of battles manually to minimize casualties or to win them in the first place. As Boris, you don't care. The reason you don't care, just to explain that very quickly, is because these units count for a lot when it comes to the auto-resolve, because they're heavily armored units, high leadership. The auto-resolve counts certain stats more than others. Armor is something that matters a great deal, and because you have some heavily armored units from the very start that are going to get high ranks very quickly, yeah, you gain a lot of power in auto-resolve, as Boris. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and I'll see you next time.